What's that one called?
Building a New Way.
Calypso. Oh yeah, here we go.
Okay.
Is that six, what did you say? Six, eight? Okay.
I'll play beautiful music, but they can't hear the bell.
Yeah, got it. Okay. What do you know?
I love people.
What?
You are welcome here, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter what your background. You are welcome here to join us as we proclaim worth in our spiritual journeys. You're welcome to join us as we sing songs that uplift our very beings. We welcome you. Yes, watch these, turn them off. Eastrose acknowledges that for at least 13,000 years, many tribes and bands have made their lives here, where our church home and our communities now exist. We remember and honor these people who made their homes in this land, the ones here now and those who lived here before. In peace, may we share this land and honor one another. Hello, my name is Eric Chui. I'm your worship leader today, and our guest speaker will be Dr. Vivek Shandas. Let's now take a moment to greet each other here today, both in the chapel and online. So if you would please stand and face the cameras by the clock, the back wall, and wave hello to our friends online. And then you can turn to your neighbor and say hello and introduce yourself. Wonderful to see everybody happily greeting one another and getting to know each other. You'll be able to continue this after the service. There will be coffee and cookies. So for our online guests, I'll say this right now, if you would like to share a joy or sorrow during that portion of the service, you can do so by entering it in the YouTube chat, and those will be shared aloud with everyone. I also encourage you to identify yourself in the chat so we may better acknowledge your presence with us today. Okay, now we have the responsive call to worship, and it's going to be on the screen, but also it's 10:16 in the blue hymnal. I'll be going back and forth between the two hymnals, which is, pardon? It's not, we're not playing the music.
Yes.
So it's a piece by Rosa Maria Zarate Macias, Profetiza Pueblo Mío, or Prophesy, O My People. I'll be reading the parts in Spanish, and if you feel up to it and would love to, you can read with me. Otherwise, you can read the indented parts in English, the white part. And it's a free translation. ¿Listos? Profetiza, pueblo mío. Profetiza una vez más que tu voz sea el eco del clamor de los pueblos en opresión. Anúnciales a los pueblos que se renovará el pacto de la justicia. La paz florecerá. Denuncia a quienes causan el llanto y la opresión. La verdad sea tu escudo. Sé luz de un nuevo sol. Esta sea tu esperanza, este sea tu luchar, construir la justicia, la nueva sociedad. Muy bien, amigos. Okay, now we have the prelude, Mercy, Mercy Me, right? Bien. Now, Karen, is this your debut playing music in the service?
Yeah.
Okay. We have the chalice lighting now, and Reverend Barbara is going to read the words as I light the chalice.
As we light our chalice this morning, let us consider these words from Tracy Johnson. We kindle our chalice flame this morning, awakening the fire of our ancestors in our hearts, beacon of freedom, held out to light the way. Light of reason, illuminating the path, spark of courage, igniting our spirits, aglow with hope for all we endeavor to do together.
The opening words today come from Dorothy Day, Commitment, and that's 560 in the Great Hymnal, by the way. Dorothy Day says, people say, what is the sense of our small effort? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is like that. No one has a right to sit down and feel hopeless. There's too much work to do. Opening hymn, please rise as you're willing and able, embody your spirit, and sing hymn 29 in the Great Hymnal, Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee, and the words are also on the screen. And you may have heard the music before, it's by Ludwig van Beethoven.
And I'm just playing an intro. I'm not going to play it all later.
I still remember when they played this on the ruins of the wall in Berlin. Okay, now we have Time of Old Ages.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Today we're going to read a story called We Planted a Tree, written by Diane Muldrow and illustrated by Bob Stocky. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe that everything in nature is connected, and trees are a vital part of this wonderful web of life. Try to imagine a world without trees. It would be empty, dry, and no good for plants, animals, or people to live in. Trees are super important for keeping our planet healthy and helping with big problems like climate change. Trees are like nature's air filters. They clean our air by trapping harmful pollutants. They breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out fresh oxygen. Trees are also like apartment buildings for nature. Many animals, birds, and insects make their homes in trees, which helps keep ecosystems in balance. And here's something cool. Trees help control the temperature around us. Their leaves give us shade and sun protection, and they release water into the air, which helps cool down hot places like cities. Now let's hear this wonderful story and learn about why planting trees is so important for our world. We planted a tree. We planted a tree. We planted a tree and it grew up. We planted a tree and it grew up while it reached for the sky and the sun. The sunshine went into the leaves and brought food to the tree, and the tree grew up. Fat little buds appeared on the branches. The sunshine went into the buds, and soon they burst open. Everywhere it was pink, and we were dizzy with springtime. The sun kept shining, the pink blossoms dropped off, but soon there were green leaves. Green, green, shiny leaves, which had food inside for the tree. Green, green, shiny leaves, which cooled us, which kept the earth cool. We planted a tree, and it grew up and gave us a shady place. The tree's leaves helped clean the air, and we breathed better. The tree fed us apples and oranges and lemons and sap for our syrup. We planted a tree, and it grew up. The tree kept the soil from blowing away. Now rainwater could stay in the earth. The soil became healthier because the tree was there, so we planted. We planted butternut squash and beans, corn and onions and cabbage in the healthy soil, the rich, dark dirt. We could grow our own food, and we ate better. We planted a tree, and it grew up, and it dropped acorns that fed the squirrels in winter. And birds came, and other animals too, to live with the tree. We planted a tree, and that one tree made the world better. We planted a tree, and that one tree helped heal the earth. We planted a tree, and it grew up, and so did we. So the next time you go outside in your neighborhood, at a park, or someplace out in nature, take a moment to thank a tree for all that they do for our world. Like today. And now let's say goodbye to the adults and head back to RE. We are walking to Nadaka Park to take a walk in nature. Oh, and if the adults along the center, thank you.
Thank you. And please remain seated and sing 123 in the great hymnal Spirit of Life. The words will be up here on the screen. The reading today is one that is actually, you can find it online at uuclimatejustice.org. It's Reimaging Together from an Extractive Age to a New Era. And this is, in some ways, the slogan of the current push to combine social justice with environmentalism. So this is an excerpt and an adaptation. We are called as UU congregations to come together to collectively envision a future of the world that we would want to create together, build our capacities and skills so we can work together, nourish our relationships and cultivate our connections, and elevate ideas and promote actions that advance justice in our communities. So you all came to hear Dr. Vivek Shandas, our speaker today, so you may have heard about him. This is his first time at Eastrose. Maybe, hopefully he'll come back again sometime. Dr. Shandas is a professor at PSU's School of Urban Planning, and he's the scientist who measured and raised this alarm about the stark differences in temperatures between poorer, less shaded neighborhoods and wealthier, shadier places right here in Portland during our heat dome in June 2021. And the words from Dr. Shandak himself: Vivek's commitment to service comes from his deep faith in humans as caretakers of the planet, a recognition that coping capacities to environmental changes varies by community, and a passion for supporting each other during times of transition. As a professor of geography at Portland State University, he aims to identify the critical needs for building verdant, sustainable, and equitable neighborhoods. His work has been featured in the New York Times, National Geographic, Scientific American, Times of India, Le Monde, Volkskrant, CNN, Cosmos, and dozens of other media outlets. During his spare time, Vivek serves as technical advisor to several organizations, including on the National Urban and Community Forestry Advisory Council and Metro's Bond Oversight Committee, and he revels in the mountains and waters of the Pacific Northwest, so, like a lot of us do. So I will allow Dr. Shandas to come and do his presentation. Topic: sweat equity, service in the era of extreme climate events.
Hello, everybody. It's lovely to be here. I feel already lifted and elated from the experience so far. I look forward to getting to know many of you. Thanks for the introduction, Eric, and thanks for the invitation to be here. How do I change slides here? How do I do that? Realized I might not have the thing. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. I'm coming to you really as a person who's trying to make sense of many different moving parts in terms of my own understanding of where my service is in this world, as well as trying to make sense of how to guide folks who are trying to do their own service in the world as a person at the university and someone who's trying to support and build capacities in municipal agencies around the country and increasingly the world in addressing issues of climate change and environmental injustice. I have a set of slides here that I'm going to put up on the screen just so I stay coherent and able to kind of follow my own thoughts sometimes when I get carried away with some of these things. I just want to, since many of you don't maybe know me, I have met many of you in the past, haven't gotten to know you, though it was lovely to hear some of your own heartfelt wishes for your family and friends and the community. I'd tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up hearing stories about the cosmos. I grew up hearing stories about the ways in which cosmic consciousness is deeply within each of us and how all manifestation of the universe is right here in every cell of our body. That was the beginning of my entry into this physical body as a spirit. And as I got to make sense of this and recognizing that if everything outside is part of me and that I am part of everything and everyone, then what does it mean when I start trying to make myself useful to this world? And when I started to ask those questions, I quickly encountered an academic institution that I wanted to study in around human-environment interactions that really got me thinking a lot about how the way we structure our environment really separates a lot of what I perceived as everything part of me, namely the green space, the animals, the plants, everything else around me, as completely separate from where I was living. And as my family immigrated from South India to the United States when I was 10 years old, I quickly saw the stark contrast, because immediately outside of my apartment building in India, I could see monkeys, I saw insects that were very big, I saw lots of things on my walk to school every morning. And that was one of the things that I saw completely different when I moved to Northern California as a young person. And as I started recognizing how we go about separating all these ways we use space in our community, I tried to reconcile for a long time how humans, in many of the traditions that I had studied in higher education, saw humans as outside of the ecosystem. In fact, that was the dominant paradigm for several hundred years of seeing humans as not part of the ecosystem. And that was just not connecting with me, because I was brought up learning that it was one and of the same. We are one. And that I didn't make any sense of. So I spent, the only way I could find my way through that big question was coming to a recognition that there are many, many connections between what I had understood as a child growing up with this mythical stories about cosmic consciousness and the environment. And that's where, when Eric reached out about a presentation, I missed it. There we go. That's when I reached out to look at what faith leaders and lots of different traditions that had identified ways in which humans and nature were one. And it's everywhere. Like, that is very clear part of human history for me, that humans and environment were one, yet the academic institutions, of which I now belong and have studied in, separated these. Yet, so the way I found my way around to kind of seeing the way that we are connected is through this literature, is through this faith that allowed me to reconcile this big question. That regardless of the faith tradition I looked at, there was a direct reference, reverence, and overall recognition that environment, humans, ecology, society were one. And that was the moment I started recognizing that my service is then to the ecosystem. And that is where I want to be centering much of the work that I do. And at that moment, as I was finishing up some of my studies, is when I transitioned to start looking at how did communities, now living in a completely different land than my ancestors had, how did communities in this land understand, recognize the ecology, the local ecology? And so I started talking to a lot of indigenous communities about what their perspective and what their lore of the ecosystem was. And it was remarkable, because it was the same thing I heard growing up. A tradition that was 10,000 miles away was saying the same stories that I had heard about it all being one, and our connection is intimate with everything around us. And that's the moment I started recognizing and learning about how local communities here in the Pacific Northwest were co-evolving the entire landscape. Fire was a very central part of a management regime that cleared land and allowed acorns to emerge. A lot of the Willamette Valley was oak savannas that the indigenous people had crafted for their own ability to survive in this area. So that moment of reckoning that, wow, humans have actively been stewarding, caretaking this landscape for time immemorial, allowed me to then recognize that I have some service for this local land that I need to be deeply committed to. Though the big question was, what form would that take? And that's where I started really kind of engaging with scholars, engaging with residents, engaging with planners, and and geographers and the like, and seeing that the relationship between what we have, how we have gone about separating these uses of our land and what we were experiencing was tied together. And that the way we are dividing up the land and creating these variations of land uses and land covers that we actively modify turns out to actually come back to affect us. And I've started getting into this area through this lens of basically temperatures and trying to understand, can we find a link between the way we're designing our landscapes and what we feel, and something we've been measuring in our bodies since we were little kids. A very easy, accessible, not like super technical exercise of measuring temperatures. So once I landed on that, of a relatively simple way of doing it, I started going out into the field and collecting a lot of temperature measurements. That's really at the core of where it started, was just going out. I recruited friends into this. I started talking about this. I brought my son into this whole conversation because when he was sitting in the home playing a video game, I said to him, hey, listen, it's 116 degrees outside. We are going to go outside and measure something that is unprecedented. And he looked at me like I was asking him to eat more broccoli, you know? And I basically said, I will let you play for a little bit longer when we get back, but for now, let's just go out and actually confront what the Earth is doing in our little ecosystem of Portland. So we're in Northeast Portland, and we started driving around and collecting temperatures. And we collected temperatures and collected temperatures, and that was a start of something I didn't realize was something relatively big, because what ended up happening was this little temperature measurement exercise was picked up by a variety of different municipal governments, federal agencies, and they started recognizing that if you do this, you can start seeing that there is a temperature difference in Portland of about 17 degrees Fahrenheit from one neighborhood to another at the same time. So if you're here in Eastrose with a HVAC system and AC that's keeping you cool inside, and you have trees surrounding this entire building, you're going to be likely much cooler than an area just down the street in Rockwood, right? And very different experiences, and we were then able to show that through a series of maps of the region. And that's kind of where at least the origin story of this whole temperature campaign started. And what's remarkable for the work is that this simple exercise of just getting some simple thermometers and going out and collecting these allows us to get at very detailed descriptions of one place to another, who's disproportionately impacted from that, and what are their abilities to cope with some of these higher temperatures. That all was happening just as this monster of a heat dome in 2021 showed up. I imagine many of you were here in late June 2021, June 28th, and that came through, and we saw a massive spike of fatalities, of hospitalizations, on the order and even larger than what we saw when COVID first arrived. It was one of those moments where everybody was recognizing, whoa, we are in the Northwest very underprepared and very maladapted, meaning we're not well situated for these kinds of big heat events to come through. And we had been doing this work, and I'd brought together a bunch of planners to try to ask the question of, like, how do we prepare? How do we actually recognize that this is going to be continuing to happen in more frequency with more intensity as the planet goes through a massive transformation right now? And this is where this spike, when we looked at who was it that was actually going to the hospital, who was it that was dying, we started seeing a very socially inequitable distribution of what was at play. And that's where we started seeing a number of different maps that I started making at the time. So this was on the left is a detailed description of temperature that we collected in different areas. And this was done back in 2016, where I had worked with some students to basically say, what are the hottest areas and where are there communities that may not have the coping capacity to manage some of these hotter temperatures. And what we started seeing over and over is that there are places very close to where we are now along the I-205 corridor and then up along this arc almost where we started seeing the hottest. The red is the hottest, the blue is the coolest area, much of the west side of Portland coolest. And we came to this recognition that it's not really rocket science to recognize that there are going to be some areas and some communities that are going to really face a disproportionate impact. And that was 2016, and this is 2021. And this is essentially where we saw the deaths occur from that heat dome. Relatively easy to predict in my assessment of this work. And it largely has to do with what has happened in those communities in the past and how those communities were often disinvested in, those neighborhoods were disinvested in it as active choices being made by decision makers around the region. Some areas got a lot of parks, they got a lot of trees. Other areas got a lot of concrete, a lot of asphalt, a lot of material that absorbs that sun-solar radiation, amplifies it, and accelerates those temperatures in those neighborhoods. And so when we started seeing that and we started recognizing that this goes back 100+ years, these decisions, and that is actually a pattern we saw across 108 cities across the United States, that the lower income communities that and those communities of color were often ones that were the hottest neighborhoods in these 108 cities, consistently across the country. So there's a pattern there. There's a systemic issue there. And that's where we started asking the question, okay, so what? So from that, we started doing a little bit of more scratching of our heads. One more map I'll show you here. And this is, again, the same Portland map. And we just wanted to see where were there the trees and where were trees being lost. And when we looked at it, the purple, darker the purple, the more the loss of trees between 2014 and 2020, right? And if you look at that same pattern of where the purple is, and then you look at this map of where the deaths occurred, it's kind of hard to unsee this relationship. Remember, this happened in 2021, just a year after a fair bit of loss of green space happened in those same neighborhoods. So you already have communities that are struggling to kind of stay cool and cope with the heat, and then you take away the thing that often provides shade and cools the neighborhood. You're kind of putting salt on a wound at that point, right? And so I presented this to City Council, Portland City Council, a year and a half ago, and I essentially made a claim that we are systemically continuing the same process that has taken place for the last 100, 150 years of disinvestment and marginalization of communities that are not able to manage. Remarkably, they moved $65 million into urban forestry. It'd been a long time coming, but it took an enormous, it wasn't just this, it was a lot of community groups, a lot of pressure, endlessly pushed, and it finally came to, okay, we're gonna really start expanding and trying to conserve the trees in some parts of Portland that are having the largest loss of green space. This isn't only true in Portland, by the way. We did this in 33 other cities across the country, and we're seeing very similar patterns that the hottest areas and cities are also losing the greatest amount of tree canopy. Very interesting in terms of how we are making those decisions as society. This is kind of what it looks like. I'll go through these relatively fast, but 2014, these are aerial photos that we use to kind of look at these spaces. Shifts, I mean, in many ways, even parking lots are not protected. Parking lot trees are not protected. Just to give you a sense of kind of what we're talking about, many of these are happening in the east part, southeast and northeast parts of Portland and Gresham, where we are now. And just one graph, three graphs, maybe three graphs. Three graphs. I can't help myself. I'm sorry. It's like one of those moments where I am in the data a lot, and so the only way I can express some of those data is often through graphs. What we basically did was take a neighborhood here in East Portland, and we wanted to find a way to show how do we bring the service that, at least the training I have, into the community. So we took a neighborhood. The green is, think of SimCity, but a very sophisticated computer platform of SimCity. And we took a neighborhood and digitized it, with green being trees, with orange being soil, grass, with gray being buildings, with black being roads. And then we mowed down all the trees. We don't want to do this in real life, so we can do this on a computer. And then we planted a few more trees. And what we saw, basically, from taking all the trees out and creating an asphalt neighborhood, basically, is that there's about a 13-degree temperature difference between that neighborhood that was there and a neighborhood that lost its trees. Right? And so that suddenly background temperature of 100 is no longer 100. You're up at 113, and that's the average of the neighborhood. So there are places that are probably 120, 122 degrees Fahrenheit, which from a human health perspective is fatal. And so we're talking about that difference here just to illustrate what it is that we're trying to do. One other thing we did, in the last graph, I promise, was take a neighborhood in East Portland, and the city is really moving with upzoning, so there's higher density in neighborhoods, right? Where we've got up to 4 to 8 units that can go in one 5,000 square foot lot. So we wanted to know, on a city block scale, this is one city block with the black being roads, how can we go from 16 units of building on one city block to 64 units on that city block, and figuring out, is there a way to keep the temperature not skyrocketing in that? So we use the same computer simulation energy balance model to basically look at many different ways you can array those buildings. Some have trees in the middle of them, some have trees as a courtyard, some are just like an asphalt. This is what we usually do. This is a multifamily residential development with roads on the side and a big asphalt parking lot in the middle. Pretty typical 1950s design, right? Hasn't changed since. And then we did this, we took this base case, that's what it looks like, and then we also did a simulation to figure out what it would look like to put trees, instead of this asphalt, what it would look like to put trees in the middle, to put green space, to lighten the roads, lighten the rooftops. And we found fundamentally that we could actually increase the number of units, number of buildings, and at the same time keep the temperatures down. So it's not a question of whether it's trees or buildings. It's a large part, and the reason we had to do this exercise is because we wanted to convey to the planners and the decision makers, you can increase the housing capacity, which we need, while also keeping temperatures down. It's not fair to do low-income housing, subsidized housing, while also getting rid of all the green space and all the potential protective measures in that space. That was my graphs. It's not really a graph, it's a chart. This is a series of projects where we're trying to move the needle. I feel like if you can do this in LA, you can do it anywhere, because getting green space in LA is like fighting, it's like the classic fight. It's a concrete jungle, and we're trying to squeeze in little pocket parks and things like that. So we arrayed this thing where you can increase greening in relation to investment by using different tiers. In a tier 1, you can get a tree in really easily. Just like there's a space there, get a tree in. In a second tier, you're gonna have to do a little more effort. You might have to cut the sidewalk. You might have to bump out the sidewalk. You might have to do some local design to get a green space in there. In tier 3, it's a bit more of a heavy lift. You're gonna have to jog the road. You might have to do some policy work. So we came up with this model and identified neighborhoods in specific locations where the city is now working with Streets LA, the transportation agency, to actually do this greening work in areas that are very concretized, which is really great. Just 2 more examples, and then I'm gonna close out, but just one more example. This is something I'm just spending a lot of time on in Jackson, Mississippi, where it's very different than LA. Abandoned neighborhoods that green space is just growing back. It's like coming back, right? And it's a very different environment. This is Fair Street, historically African-American very economically marginalized, now part of Jackson. And we're working with residents here to re-envision. There's two churches that basically are on both sides of Fair Street, and we're working with the churches to essentially see what is the vision of that community for bringing that street back as a cultural center, as a hub, as a green center as well. So we're doing a lot of visioning exercises, prioritizing to move forward with this work in Jackson. Then finally, locally, we're working with the city of Gresham here. I think Gresham is an amazing place to be working with some of this green space work. It's challenging, no doubt, like any municipal agency is, though there's a constellation of champions in the city that are really trying to move on this. We created this thing called Growing Shade in Gresham, and it really is a way of identifying at a very local level where you can get green space planted, where it's available, and then what the community characteristics are like in that place, what the heat is like, what the air quality is like there as well. So anyway, lots of data-rich exercises. Again, my training to try to reconcile how do you do the work, stewardship work with the earth while bringing your own work into this. So I want to leave you just in this last slide and ask you a simple question, and that is, or a series of questions, and I'm just going to pose them one at a time for you. The first one is, Earth is changing. Can you help? Ask yourself how. I heard a lot of amazing things already in the preamble with Eric's and others' description of the connection between earth and faith. I think there's a really big movement right now in this space that I'm very excited about and wanting to support. And then, should you center those who face disproportionate harm? And talking with others can help with priorities and plans. And that's where this community, I think, is an incredible opportunity to be able to be in conversation, in worship and in ceremony and ritual to figure out what is the priority, what are the plans that need to be in place, and then reviewing what are the systems that, what do we know about the systems that perpetuate harm? Because this is a systemic issue. We all have our individual role to play, but we know from at least the work we've done that this is a systemic issue. And then suggestion of offering your help graciously. I think that's part of what we're offering, your expertise graciously here. And finally, last two is, shall we work together in a collective effort to see an earth that sustains all life? It is going to take all of us, especially when it comes to things like climate. It's everybody's movement. And the last thing I have that spells out your place is thinking about evaluating past practices can help us. Evaluating past practices can help us learn to do better. Yes? Yeah, that's kind of what I have for you. And I want to leave you with this quote that I found on a redwood tree in Northern California, where I do a summer camp interfaith summer camp with kids every year. And I just read it to you. To be like these, straight, true, and fine, to make our world like theirs a shrine. Sink down, O traveler, on your knees. God stands before you in these trees. Thank you.
I don't have a question. This is an observation that the city of Gresham, I received a land use planning notice about 3 weeks ago that they want to build a trailer parking lot near me that will involve the removal of 47 protected trees.
So all of your research shows the what I would say is direct economic effect. You know, I think that right now we are willing to put money out to help mitigate some of the temperature increase. So it's good in terms of that. Have you done, I suspect that once we rebuild communities in this way, we will have more social benefit as well, or have some social benefit. And that's clear in what you're trying to do with those two churches. That's part of building the social benefit into that change. But have you done any research about the changes that happen in how people respond, feel, treat one another?
Yeah. It's a really interesting question. It's about the relationship between social engagement and personal experience, feeling, and the climate and environmental challenges. I have dabbled in this area. I can speak to a whole canon of work that's happening right now around disaster management. There's a field of community resilience and disaster management, and one of the tenets that show up in that area is that when folks feel isolated, that they are more vulnerable to impacts from disasters, and that they have greater greater vulnerability to the likelihood that they're not going to make it through that disaster, and that when people are connected, they are far more resilient. There's that's just a very brief summary of it, but I've seen it personally when I was in New Orleans after Katrina, and then I was just before that in Mumbai in India, where a similar typhoon had hit. And what was remarkable about the two, I wanted to write something about this, I didn't, but the remarkable thing about the two was that in New Orleans, it was almost like everybody was on their own. That's what I heard from communities. Like, I would just want to make sure my family, or at least my household, was okay. And it was like everyone evacuate. And in Mumbai, what I heard consistently was that we knew where all the older adults were in this apartment building, and they were our first people we wanted to go and figure out how to get them out of harm's way, excuse me. And that, to me, when I started seeing like how the connectedness of cultures and the connectedness of communities and allows for a greater level of resilience, like empirically, that's when it started really dawning on me that the most important thing to do is probably be in community, in connection. And the research itself also shows with heat and things like that, friends, family, and neighbors are often one of your first go-tos. And your community will allow you to find opportunities, whether it's for financial opportunities, but also in these cases, like opportunities for getting out of challenging situations. So yeah, that's kind of what I have for you on that. But it is a huge area of work right now. And mostly what I'm trying to get out there is this idea that we are better off when we're in relation with each other, with the earth, with each other. So trying to take this to kind of get that message out there as well, because it is about then what are the solutions.
Yeah, hi. This just crossed my mind. Would it make any difference if we whitewashed all the dark asphalt?
Yeah, I mean, you're not the first person to have that thought, I'll tell you that. It's actually something, it's interesting because I get that a lot. I'm not a big fan of whitewashing all the asphalt. I'm a fan of whitewashing selective places. And there was a study, and the reason I say it was a study in LA, where LA spent, I think it was on the order of about $17 million on taking white paint and putting it on roads in Pacoima and several different neighborhoods. And it turns out one of my colleagues from Arizona State University brought a sensor, one of our sensors, and ran it by there. And when the sun's coming down, you gotta follow me for 1 second here. It hits the ground, and that ground absorbs it. If you put white on there, the sun's rays come down and it bounces off. So the people who were walking on that crosswalk across the street were actually experiencing hotter temperatures because that sun's heat has to go somewhere. So they were actually measuring 5 degrees hotter than before they'd whitewashed those roads. And to me, it's kind of like that's the complexity of some of this work, is that we're so excited about, oh, we just lighten the surfaces and it'll lower the temperatures. And sure, the ground itself stays cooler, but the ambient environment actually was hotter, measurably. And so I'm a fan for kind of taking that and putting it up on rooftops. You know, just kind of get it out of the way, because that's still going to keep that sun's radiation from absorbing into these surfaces. Even building sides potentially and things like that, there are selective places where it's probably better to do that than others. But yeah, whole area.
So the neighborhood that this is on, okay. The neighborhood that I just moved out of is the Argay Terrace neighborhood, where the Kmart is and where the truck depot is being put in.
Yep.
And while I lived there, there was a large community pushback to not get that project approved. I'm wondering, in neighborhoods like that where the apartments are built in the 70s, and that's after they stopped really thinking about the way they were building buildings in the specific environment. Like, I live in a historic building now, and it's a lot easier to keep cool just because of the fact that they were thinking about, you know, where the windows are. But I'm wondering what we can do to create community in those neighborhoods, because the thing that I noticed in this move is that my neighbors there were so tired and so overworked, and the heat was unbearable, and there's no walkability, and there's no way to re-engineer Sandy, which is the street I lived on, and there's no way to undo the horrible, you know, devastation of the fact that there's no tree cover anymore because it's all warehouses. But people live there, and people are going to continue to live there because that's where they can afford to. So how can we create community and create shade and create space in areas like that where there would have to be like massive re-engineering?
Yeah. I mean, it's a really hard question, really interesting one. I would quickly, maybe it's an ongoing conversation, and each neighborhood is different. Each little like apartment complex is different. Everything, when you look at just the physical specifications, the specs of a building, everything is gonna have some specific thing that has to be done. I would maybe quickly say that there are enormous funds, like the Portland Clean Energy Fund, benefits fund, like that is essentially putting in weatherization. So part of what you want to do is try to create a cool environment indoor. It subsidizes heat pumps, which I know, this HVAC systems, which I know. So the incremental steps to it, there's green space, free trees and free green space. The tricky part is working with groups like DPave to be able to pull up some of that asphalt, to be able to open the earth up again to allow for those trees to be planted. And really to work, ultimately, if it's an apartment building thing, I get most squeamish about is working with the property managers. Because they're really complex people. It is really hard to work with property managers. I've tried on several different apartment complexes where I've had interactions to work with property managers. It's very difficult. Yeah, and they're paid to often do that. So it's like, how do you go to the upstream to the owner, then property manager to do that?
We have time for one more question here.
Yeah, that is kind of the one knot that complicates everything, is how do you get people to care about anyone but themselves and their immediate family in this culture? Kind of big stumbling block there. But one of the other big things that I've run into is in these poor neighborhoods, there's this, more often than not, I don't want to cast a wide net here, but a lot of people tend to see, oh, there's green space going in, oh, there's a park going in, how much is my rent going to jump this month? How much is urban renewal just going to be gentrification, and how much are the and I'm not really sure how to push back on that one, and I'm just wondering a little bit what your experience has been, if you've gotten any of that, and if so, like what you've said to that effect.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So this question gets in the kind of moniker that's used is green gentrification, right? A place gets green and then it raises property. taxes, and then it forces people to leave because they can't afford that neighborhood anymore. And we just actually, it's interesting, 2 reports came out, one written by us around green gentrification and the other written by Trust for Public Lands, both really complementary reports. And fundamentally what they are finding is that people who are greening, often like urban forestry, who are greening neighborhoods, cannot play much of a role in affecting gentrification processes. They have to work in collaboration with planning agencies, and they have to work in collaboration with development agencies, which are often different in municipalities. And if they, by themselves, are expected to keep, taxes down, gentrification from happening, that's very unlikely. Though in consort, when you're putting in a park, the park developer, meaning the city, has to work in consort with that planning agency and with that development agency to be able to, in many ways, do anti-displacement policies in that neighborhood. And that really is in large part how it's done. And there are many different ways anti-displacement policies can actually take place. They're happening all over the country. There's community benefits agreements that also go along with that. So there are tools in the toolbox to be able to keep that from happening. That said, I will say there's some evidence, like the skyline in New York is the poster child of green gentrification, of a park going in and prices going so high that no communities that used to live there could live there. Those are, what we're seeing are largely anomalies. They're happening with huge investments into green space. Parks in neighborhoods, small trees in neighborhoods, we are not seeing any evidence of that right now. And so that is reassuring for me in many ways when you're advocating for green space and people concerned about it, but we're not seeing evidence of putting in green space and seeing that many other things are playing together with that. If there are other certain desirable land uses that suddenly show up or other things that affect it. But trees are a small, small component, if at all, in any of those processes of gentrification.
Thank you, Dr. Shandas.
Thank you.
Given us a lot of food for thought and hopefully an impetus to more action. And I've got to find my paper here. So 12 o'clock, I'm hoping that we might be, some of us will get together to talk further. But now we'll have our closing hymn, 1074. It's Turn the World Around, as Harry Belafonte. Please rise, you're able, and willing and able in body and spirit, and sing the hymn with us. Words will be on the screen.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, we will do the offering. Half of each week's Sunday's collection is shared with a local organization doing good works in our area. This third quarter, our Sharing the Bounty partner is Outgrowing Hunger. Outgrowing Hunger builds and operates community farms and gardens for refugees, immigrants, and people who care about affordable food access to real food in Portland and Gresham. Outgrowing Hunger is the contract operator for all the community gardens programs in Gresham, including in Nadaka Park, and many of the gardens in East Portland. They also have a 22-acre farm in Boring, where they rent irrigated farmland to qualified growers. If you are a first-time visitor, please let the basket pass you by. You are our guest today. We now gratefully receive the gifts of this congregation. Patty Ann will pass out the baskets. I'll extinguish the chalice. Help us to be ever, can you hear me? Help us to be ever the ever hopeful gardeners of the Spirit, who know that without darkness, nothing comes to birth, as without light, nothing flowers. By Mary Sarton. Go today in peace. wonderful musicians today. Announcements. Sunday, this coming Sunday, October 6th, is Potluck Sunday. So we hope you can all make it. I'm having a humongous apple harvest right now, so I will bring something that has to do with apples.
It's vegan potluck.
It's vegan, that's right, it's vegan potluck. Apples are vegan. Okay. October 12th, Saturday, there'll be a yard work party. That's a couple weeks from now. All hands on deck, please, for full cleanup, all those who are able to make it. And, another announcement from Keen. Veggies in the Thatcher room right now. And he says, don't make me take them home. So pick up some veggies. They're going to be really good. Patty has an announcement about our hike. It's going to be a little bit different than what we had in the pedals. So we're going to go to Forest Park using public transit. So people will meet at 8:30 at our house, Patty and Eric's house, near Mall 205, and then go to the Gateway Transit Center to catch Max, or meet us directly at Max at 8:45. So contact Patty to Patty Walsh by Tuesday afternoon.
Who is Patty Walsh?
Yes, who are you? The Patricia Walsh. That's her email. And then Susie Matrango Watson has an announcement. I can't imagine what she's going to talk about.
Sure. Okay, I'm here about the auction. Now, I have a couple of things. We're having not a silent auction, an online auction for Thursday and Friday, and I talked to Katie Norris, and she is the kind of the guru on that, and she said if you pull it up according to the information that was sent out, it's only partially there. So it is working in progress. She's out of town. She's going to be working on it Monday and Tuesday, and it's quite possible on Wednesday you may be able to pull it up and look at everything that's there. So you get online, you see the things you want, you bid on it, you come back to it, you bid on it, you come back to it, and then hopefully you get that item and you pay for it via credit card. Second thing is in the past, we have had catalogs for all the items we have sold, but we're doing things a little different this year. And so instead of a catalog, I have this brochure, and this is for the actual auction. So I will have them at the auction beforehand. I'm not beforehand. So when you come to the auction, you can pick one up, or as soon as we get done with service, I can hand these out to you also. And it has lists of items that you can bid on. And there may be more coming. And then Linda is going to be offering to help out with childcare at the auction, but she also wants to participate. So she would like to share that time of doing childcare. Linda, raise your hand. There she is. If you're willing to help her out so she can attend the auction and buy some things that she wants to buy, that would be great for her. And let's see, one more thing. We need some more card tables. If you have one, you can drop it off at church. You can, on Friday, we're setting everything up starting at 10 o'clock. You can come to church and drop it off then. The actual day of the auction, we'll have people here early. If you're bringing food for the auction and you haven't signed up, there's a sign-up sheet outside there for just finger food. Also, bring it to church on Saturday before the auction. So 1 o'clock, 1:30, so we can set it up. Let me see, make sure I have everything else on that. Let's see, card tables, food sign up. Okay, now I'm glad to introduce the person who represents Portland Fruit Tree Project. And that is our lightning round sponsor, which means on the auction, not only online, but also in person, we will give money to the Portland fruit tree auction. So the money that comes in, half of it goes to Eastrose and half goes to the nonprofit. It's all 100% write-off, so that's always nice. And Heather, will you come up and talk a little bit about your group?
Sure thing. First of all, thank you everybody for inviting me today. This has been really lovely, and I, as a tree nerd organization, am a little starstruck. So thank you. We've been in a million meetings. You've never seen me there probably, but I'm watching, and thank you so much for all that you do. So Portland Fruit Tree Project, we care for and we harvest from the trees and feed, the trees that feed and shade our neighborhoods. So we care for fruit trees. We harvest from fruit trees. For people who have too many apples on their apple tree, you can call us. We'll come and we'll help you pick them. Yes. I got you if you need us. But then we see that there's a lot of those trees that are actually in pretty bad condition. So, I mean, who hasn't seen the 40-foot cherry tree that no one can reach the cherries on? We do our best to work with people before they get completely out of control to make sure that the trees stay a manageable height and that the fruit stays really beautiful, so that when we share it with our partner organizations, which are typically food pantries, CSA projects, that it's really great fruit that we're getting out. We're not giving people a bunch of buggy apples that are going to make them more depressed than happy. We really try to center joy and abundance in everything that we do. For the fruit that we harvest, we're working with groups on a culturally responsive basis. So if we're harvesting a bunch of persimmons, those persimmons are going to largely organizations that serve Asian people. Right now we work with Asian Food Pantry, which serves Asian elders. We also work with Familia San Acción, which is for Latinx families. So we really try to be through the community in a way where the fruit is being best used and most loved, versus people landing with something that they're like, great, I have no idea what to do with an Asian pear. This has been fun. And then when we harvest, a lot of the time we get fruit that's like, not that great. So we take all of that fruit and we're doing a bunch of cider presses with it this year predominantly. So if anyone's, October 5th, I know it's the day of the auction, so don't come to my event, come to your event. But we
What time is your event?
We start at noon, so you could party hop, I think.
You could go there, come here.
Yeah, you can come drink some cider with us and then pop back here.
Yes.
Up to you. Yeah, and we're going to be pressing apples, pears, basically anything that comes to us, and I think technically it's not vegan, but it is organic. Buggy apples are a joy. So does anyone have any questions about that? Oh, the other thing I did want to mention in light of this project that we were talking about in terms of heat, we were really lucky to get some grant funding to do some tree planting projects, because we've learned that communities of color and immigrant communities especially don't necessarily want the trees that other organizations want to plant with them. They don't want large form trees. They really want fruit trees. So we had the great joy of working with individuals who partnered with Apano, which works with AAPI families, and Growing Gardens that works with Latinx gardeners. And we planted trees on private property with those families. So we were sure that we're not contributing to green gentrification. We're adding all of that value directly into your home, and it's building your generational wealth. And then, of course, it's also going to be this beautiful, abundant source of food in the next 3 to 10 years. And then we do tree care, and we install basic irrigation for those families, just to make sure that the trees were set up for success. So we did 3 years of that work as well. So we're all working on the same direction. Ours is a much shorter tree, though. Still provides shade. So thank you so much for letting me come babble.
Will you have information for us to hand out?
I don't have a darn thing printed with me.
Okay.
That would have been good planning, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can, if you come by here and drop it off.
Yeah.
Between now and Saturday.
You got it. I live a whole 7 minutes away, so I think I can make it happen.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
That's great. Does anyone have any questions for Heather?
Yeah.
If I bid on the computer, do I get a fruit tree, or do I? Is it just a donation?
Yeah. I don't have any trees sitting around, right? I might, though. Email me. I might have fruit trees for you.
I wasn't sure what I was bidding on.
Oh, yeah. The money goes to them and to Eastrose.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much on that.
Okay.
Squeeze.
It's just a donation, whatever.
Harvey, I'm sorry.
It's not an item that you're bidding on, you're just making a donation.
Correct. Thank you.
Yes. Anyone else? Okay. I guess we're done.
We're done.
And?
So it's coffee time. You may go have coffee and cookies. And as far as discussion, I think we'll postpone that till. Okay, this will be really short. One more announcement.
Okay. Well, I'm back here to tell you what I started to tell you about, which is I'm a watercolor artist, and I'm participating in the upcoming show sponsored by the Gresham Area League for the Arts. And the show is starting October 1st through the end of the month. The theme of the show is Food for Thought. And the show is going to be in the building across from the City Hall, where the Gresham School District office is on one side and the fire department on the other. So we have a reception coming up October 4th, 5:30 to 7. So hope to see you there. Thanks.
And I have a brochure for the auction. Please come and see me, or you can pick it up the actual day, but this way you get to see some of the items that are going to be auctioned off.
I apologize, ran over a little bit, but we'll have coffee and cookies now, and at 12:15 we can meet here. Whoever gets here first gets to use the rocking chair. Thank you, and have a good week.